Kiddushin, Daf Yomi, coming out of hiding, Haarec, kevodо. Shame is a force within us that causes us to avoid confrontation with the truth. We're ashamed of the truth, and we're embarrassed of the truth. It's like the brothers of Yosef were embarrassed when Yosef revealed himself. To be confronted with emes is something very difficult to handle, and we tend to avoid it because of the sense of shame. But humility is the middle we use as the outcome of confronting with truth. When you are confronting truth, it's anava, it's humility that results. And so by using shame, that's a little bit of ein habayishan lamed. Therefore, a person with shame can't learn, he can't grow, because with shame we avoid truth, and growth comes from confronting truth. And when we confront truth, the truth is much bigger than us. That's when we develop the midah of anava. This Gemara, once again, is just so poignant for what we're going to be doing in 15 minutes' time when we start slichus. I feel so bad for people who are going to be saying slichus this morning who haven't learned this piece of Gemara. What a different slichus it's going to be. That's just what I kept on feeling this morning. Baruch Hashem, Rebbeinu Hashem, what a gift to have taught me this piece of Gemara before we say slichus this morning, before we come to Rosh Hashanah. Here's the Gemara. We're learning about kibud in the sugya, and we're talking about the obligations a child has to a parent has to a child, difference between a mother and a father. That's where it comes to kiddushin. And the Gemara gets on to comparing kibud to the mitzvah of honoring Hashem, so much so that on the top of our Amud, Tani Tana Kamed Rav Nachman, Bizman she'adam metza'eret aviv ve'et imo. If a person causes anguish to his parents, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then Hashem is saying, Yafeh asiti shelo darti beinehem. I'm happy I don't live in that family. She'ilmale darti beinehem, because if I would be living in that family, tziaruni, they would cause me anguish just like they're causing their parents anguish. Yuf. Just stop there for a moment and think what that is. When there's not shalom bayis between a child and a parent, there's no shechina in that home. The Rebbeinu Shalom removes himself and says, Baruch Hashem. Hashem himself says, Baruch Hashem, that I don't live in that family. Anybody who commits an avera in secret, in quiet, in privacy, is pushing Hashem's presence away. My throne is in heaven, but my feet are on the ground. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, a person at the beginning of Shulchan Aruch, we have this. It's forbidden to walk 4 amot fully upright. The Baal HaTanya describes exactly what that fully upright means. It means that if you put your eyes down, you can't see your feet without moving your head. If your head is tilted so high that you can't see your feet without dropping your chin, then your head is too high. That's what komaz kufa means. Shenemar malei kol haaretz kevodо. Rav Huna Breder Rav Yeshua lo maski 4 amot begilui harosh. Rav Huna Breder Rav Yeshua didn't go for amot without something on his head, without a head covering. Omar shchina l'mayla mirosh. He said, of course I've got a head covering. The shchina's on top of my head. 4 memrot. I want to start with the first one, and I have 3 or 4 questions to ask. Number 1. It's clear that there is a certain character trait that causes an individual to cause pain to his parents, and that same character trait could cause him to cause pain to Hashem. What is that character trait? What is it that drives a person to cause his parents anguish? We're not talking a person does it unintentionally. We're talking about a person does it intentionally. He causes pain to his parents. Why would he do that? What's the middle? And in what way, number 2, how does that translate to causing pain to Hashem? What does this person do that causes pain to Hashem? And number 3, how does Hashem even feel pain? Hashem has no physical being. How do you hurt Hashem? How do you cause pain and suffering and discomfort to Hashem? What does that mean? And number 4, what is the flow of sugyas? We've got 4 memrot. We've got 4 statements in this piece of Gemara. What is the sequence of memrot? In order to understand it, we're going to learn the most amazing, stunning, beautiful piece of shach on Chumash. The shach on Chumash is not the shach on Shulchan Aruch, although they lived at the same time. The shach on Shulchan Aruch lived in Vilna. The shach on Chumash lived in Tzfat and later went to Chalab, or Aleppo as it's now known in Syria, which was a big Mokum Torah at the time. And he was a Makubal, and he wrote a parish on Chumash. Very few people are familiar with the shach on Chumash. But one thing I will say to you, I don't believe you will find anybody in the last 500 years, since this was published, who uses this shach to explain this Gemara. If anybody who's listening in finds such a person, I'll give them $100 because I'm interested to know if there is anybody else. Just altogether how to explain this Gemara is very difficult. And we'll use the shach, how I came to it is a story for another time. Says the shach, on the case of the Meraglim who saw the giants in Eretz Yisrael. V'sham ra'inu et hanefilim. V'her'eim HaKadosh Baruch Hu la'meraglim kein. Why did Hashem show them these giants? Just to terrify them? Why? Lomar lahem gedulato yitbarach kama briot yesh. To show them how many wonderful, enormous, magnificent creatures there are in the world. And you go, sometimes, you see some of these athletes, you see some of these people who are terribly tall, all these magnificent looking German people, blonde and blue-eyed. And then you see a Yid. And you say, what is this? Why does Hashem show us this, how beautiful these different nations are? And that we're not particularly beautiful in any particular way. Lomar afal pi sheyesh lo kama briot, so that you know, even though Hashem has these beautiful creatures that He's created, every time you see a beautiful human being, stop and admire the beauty of that creation. Lo bachar ela b'Yisrael. But who did Hashem choose? Ugly little us. He chose us, not all of these 7-foot athletes. V'kulam kfuyim lahem liYisrael, and they're all subject to Yisrael. It just happened to chance on a YouTube documentary showing what the Jews are doing in the world now, not just how many Nobel Prizes they've won over the last 100 years. How much of the economy and of innovation today is Jewish? And it's not made by Jews. I thought at first this was an anti-Semitic thing, that's why I watched it. The Jews are controlling the world, but it wasn't. It was a great Kiddush Hashem. Hashem says, on the one hand, a human being is so great. David HaMelech says, on the other hand, what are we? And yet we're a little less than Hashem. Says the Shach on Chumash, and Hashem Yisborach, you made us have to eat, because if we didn't need to eat, we would think we were gods. That's how great we are. The fact that we have to work for a living and we have to toil and we have to put food on the table teaches us that we're not gods. And that's in order that you should know your worth and your limitation, that if you don't eat, you'll die. And even though you're so dependent, you've got to eat like an animal eats, you still are ruling over the whole of the Bria. The entire universe is dependent on how you as a Jew conduct yourself. That's what a Jew is. But now there's a possibility of arrogance. If you realize all these beautiful people in the world and Hashem chose us, now there's a chance we'll come to arrogance. Bench after eating, so that you never forget that if you didn't eat, you would die. You're dependent as your pet. You've got to feed your pet, otherwise it dies. You too, you're just a pet. You're just an animal that has to be fed. That's the other side of you. And here we have a whole new parish of the bracha we say so many times every single day when we come out of the bathroom. What's the chokhmah? Not just the scientific wonders of the human body. The chokhmah, the wisdom, is that Hashem gave us the necessity to go to the restroom so that lo yitka'eh v'lo yachshov atzmo ke'elokah. To remind yourself every time you relieve yourself, you're just a little nothing. You're just an animal. And you're a human being. It's both, but nothing to get arrogant about. You've got to go to the bathroom just like anybody else. And we know that Paro used to go to the bathroom where nobody could see him because that would have shown them he's human. That shows our humanity. That shows our frailty and our vulnerability every time we go to the bathroom. We got to realize, one little blockage, and we can't operate. Our minds, we're going crazy in our minds, and we can't focus, and we can't have attention. We need a restroom. Just to remind us at the end of the day who we are in essence. A human being knows as he grows older and becomes independent and powerful and wealthy. My parents know me as a little baby who's diaper had to be changed. They saw me as a little dependent nothing. They fed me, they raised me, they saw me have temper tantrums, they saw me have depressions, they saw me make foolish mistakes, they saw me make idiots of myself. They've seen it all. It's why very often we find Baalei Tshuva reject the first rabbi who was Makarev them, because he saw them in their early phases. And it's embarrassing. They want to get away from that. They want to now go and learn with a rabbi who saw them for the first time after they came out of yeshiva and treats them like a regular person. Go to the rabbi who saw them where you started. They don't want that. Your parents saw you where you started, and where did you start? Dame ayin bata, never forget where you started, because that will hold you in check. Says the Siftei Kohen on the Chumash. That's the meaning of Asher Yotza. And that's the meaning of this Gemara. He wants to hide from his parents. And that's the biggest tsar you can give another human being, is to pretend they don't exist, is not to see them, not to hear them, to look right through them. To make people invisible is the most painful thing you can do to another human being. It's the most disrespectful thing you can do. And there's something in each of us that wants to do that to our parents, to pretend they don't exist. And that's the same midah we use with the Ribbono Shel Olam. The Ribbono Shel Olam knows me in all my weaknesses. The Ribbono Shel Olam knows me ayin bat or mi tipa serucho. He knows where I come from. The Ribbono Shel Olam has seen me do terrible things. The Ribbono Shel Olam has seen me in my weakness. There's something inside us that wants to run away from the Ribbono Shel Olam. And to make Hashem invisible is the same thing, because making somebody invisible causes them spiritual pain, not physical pain. And so when you make Hashem invisible, you're causing Hashem spiritual pain as well. And what does that mean, you're making him invisible? Rashi says, on the Pasuk V'ha'aretz Hadom Ragli, a little bit further, because when you're over Beseter, that's the next piece of Gemara. So now you do an Avero Beseter, you do it in private, secret. Why? Because Hashem's not looking, Hashem won't see me. You're making Hashem invisible, Dochik Raglei Ashchina. You're contracting Hashem, says Rashi. The nature of the Shechina is mishtarbev veyored lamata. The Shechina is elastic. It expands from Shamayim till our heads, till us. And by acting in secret against Hashem, you're cutting off his legs. You're saying he's not here. Umekatzro lomar ein kan. You're saying there's no Hashem here. That's what you're doing, just like you do with your parents. There's no Hashem here. And the truth is, Malei kol haaretz kvodo. And when you stand upright, when you're arrogant, you're also pushing Hashem out. As if you saw Hashem there, if you knew Hashem was present, you wouldn't stand arrogantly. The only reason you stand arrogantly is because you don't see Hashem. You've made Hashem invisible, and you think if you can't see him, he can't see you. And with that, you're metzair the Ribbono Shel Olam. You're making him invisible. The worst thing you can do to another human being is make him invisible. And the worst thing you can do to the Ribbono Shel Olam Kibiyochel is to make him invisible. And that's what all of these people are doing, and that's the connection between them. And that's why the Gemara says, Bava Kama on Daf Ayin Tes, what is the difference? They asked the Talmud of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, asked Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, what's the difference between a Ganev and a Gazlan? A Gazlan is somebody who robs in open, and a Ganev does it secretly where nobody can see, and a Ganev has to pay careful, has to pay double, and sometimes 4 or 5 times the amount of his theft, whereas a Gazlan only has to pay once, he has to return the lost property. Why do we punish a Ganev more than a Gazlan? And what does he answer? Because the Gazlan treats people and God the same. He's not running away from anybody, he does it in public. The Ganev does it in secret because he doesn't want humans to see. What about Hashem? Osa ayin shel mata ki'ilu eina ro'eh. He made the eye of down here, and the Gemara says ayin shel mata. This is not Hashem's eye up in heaven. Hashem's eye is right here. Hashem is in your bedroom with you. Hashem is in your dining room with you, in your living room with you, in your office, on the bus, in your car. He's right there with you. And that's why Rav Huna says, that's why I wear a covering on my head, because Shechina lemala miroshi. Just as there's a difference in the Beis HaMikdash, there's a curtain between where the Shechina is and where the people are. So there's a curtain above my head between where the Shechina is and where I am, to remind me all the time the Shechina is just above my head. It's touching me. It's right there. But a Ganev makes it as if ayin shel mata ki'ilu eino ro'eh, and that's the worst thing that there can be. In conclusion, there's an unbelievably magnificent piece of Maharal on this Gemara, where the Maharal says this idea of the person doing it secret, in secret, the ha'over aveira beseter, or the Ganev who does it in secret. Because if you're doing it in public, says the Maharal, ein Hashem yisborach befarhesia. You're not pushing Hashem away because Hashem isn't there in public. Don't think you'll find Hashem in a public place. Of course He's there, but you won't find Him, you won't feel Him. You feel Hashem in the depths of your private heart, when you're in a quiet space, when there are no people around, where nobody is looking, when you're on your own with your own thoughts and feelings. That's where you'll find Hashem. And if He does the Avera B'Farhes, He is not putting Hashem away. Hashem isn't there to start with. But if He does it, the Avera, in private, Hashem is there when you're in private, when you're on your own, when you're alone. That's where to find Hashem, where you're in shul on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Don't look for Hashem in the shul. Don't look for Hashem in the crowds. Don't look for Hashem in the Kiddush afterwards. Get into your private space and spend Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur in your private space, because that's where you find the Ribbono Shel Olam. Ein Hashem Yisborach b'farhesia, rak hakavod Hashem Yisborach b'seiter uvetzino. The kavod of the Ribbono Shel Olam will only be found b'seiter uvetzino. We don't have time to reference the Gemara in Brochus on the next page of the source sheet, but you can have a look at that yourself and you'll realize the connection of how important that is. And that's how we can understand this piece of Gemara. To try and flee, to try and hide from the Ribbono Shel Olam out of Busha is doichek ragle hashchino. You're contracting the Ribbono Shel Olam, you're making Him invisible. And just as that's the worst thing you can do to a fellow human being, so too it causes terrible tsar to the Shechina, it causes terrible tsar to Hashem, terrible pain and anguish to God Himself.